Anterior cervical spine muscles. Sternocleidomastoid. Origin, sternal head, anterior surface of manubrium. Clavicular, medial third of the clavicle. Insertion, mastoid process and lateral third superior nuchal line. Action, flexion, lateral flexion and rotation to the opposite side of the CS and head. Extends head. Elevates the sternum and clavicle during forced inspiration. Hyoid muscles, suprahyoid muscles. Mylohyoid. Origin, mylohyoid line of the body of the mandible. Insertion, body of hyoid bone and median raphe. Action, elevates hyoid bone and floor of mouth, swallowing, and depresses the mandible. Digastric. Origin, anterior belly, inner surface of body of mandible, digastric fossa. Posterior belly, mastoid process of temporal bone, inner surface. Insertion, body of hyoid bone, via intermediate tendon held by facial sling. Action, elevates hyoid bone and depresses mandible. Geniohyoid. Origin, inferior mental spine of mandible. Insertion, body of hyoid bone. Action, elevates hyoid bone and depresses mandible. Stylohyoid. Origin, styloid process of temporal bone. Insertion, body of hyoid bone and base of the greater horn. Action, elevates and retracts the hyoid bone. Infrahyoid muscles. Thyrohyoid. Origin, obligate line of thyroid cartilage. Insertion, lower border of hyoid bone. Action, elevates thyroid cartilage, larynx, and depresses hyoid bone. Omohyoid. Origin, upper border of the scapula and the suprascapular ligament, and attached to the clavicle and first rib by a sling of cervical fascia. Insertion, lower lateral border of the body of hyoid. Action, depresses hyoid bone. Sternohyoid. Origin, medial end of clavicle and manubrium of sternum. Insertion, body of hyoid bone, middle portion. Action, depresses hyoid bone. Sternothyroid. Origin, manubrium of sternum, posterior surface. Insertion, obligate line of thyroid cartilage, inferior border. Action, depresses thyroid cartilage, larynx. Scalenes. Anterior scalene. Origin, anterior tubercles of TVP C3 to C6. Insertion, tubercle and ridge on upper surface of the first rib. Action, elevates first rib during forced inspiration, lateral flexion, and rotation to the opposite side. Middle scalene. Origin, posterior tubercles of TVP C2 to C7. Insertion, superior surface of first rib. Action, elevates first rib during forced inspiration, lateral flexion, and rotation to the opposite side of the CS. Posterior scalene. Origin, posterior tubercles of TVP C4 to C6. Insertion, lateral surface of second rib. Action, elevates second rib during forced inspiration, lateral flexion, and rotation to the opposite side of the CS. Longus capitis. Origin, anterior tubercles of the TV piece of C3 to C6. Insertion, inferior surface of occipital bone, basilar part. Action, flexion and lateral flexion of the head and CS. Longus colli. Origin, inferior oblique, anterior surface of the bodies of T1 to T3. Superior oblique, anterior tubercles of TVP C3 to C5. Vertical segment, anterior surface of bodies C5 to T3. Insertion, inferior oblique, anterior tubercles of TV piece of C5 to C6. Superior oblique, anterior arch of atlas. Vertical segment, anterior surface of bodies of C2 to C4. Action, flexion and lateral flexion of the CS.